It's time for College Sports Weekly. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Bill Hazen. Last year was something of an off year for the Wisconsin Badgers, but now it's quite clear that's over. The Badgers are back with one of the strongest running games in the country, but that's not all, according to former Ohio State coach Urban Meyer, as he analyzes the Badgers' passing game for the Big Ten Network.
You can tell that Wisconsin knows how to throw the football. Who's ever designed this play, it's excellent. So you can see the short motion. They're doing it for two reasons. Number one, identifying man and zone. They bump, it's easily see it's man coverage. The quarterback already knows he's going to work the three-man side. A.J. Taylor does an excellent job because he's well coached. Notice he comes back not quite as far as he did before he went motion.
Right.
And that's because he wants to get leverage on the defender. So he does a great job here, gets leverage. Look at the timing. Timing and ball placement. By the time the back foot hit, this is excellent, man. This is when you know Wisconsin's got a good team.
No doubt.
Watch the right foot hit and the ball's out. You can't defend this. This is really well done.
And that's some of what's happening. Here's what's coming up on College Sports Weekly. The High Plains drifter of college football, Coach John Jenkins, is on the road again. This time it's Dallas. He'll be reporting on a new generation of Mustang Mania, and he'll evaluate games for both last week and this week. Where is the TV audience for local news going? Rex Lardner will tell you when we talk shop. We'll begin a series on high school sports in Indiana. Our guest will be the commissioner of the Indiana High School Athletic Association, Bobby Cox. And Gene DeLisio reports bad news for a Division III football powerhouse on the small college beat. That's all ahead on College Sports Weekly.
Hi, I'm Mia Hamm. As a professional soccer player and a future soccer mom, I know how fun and rewarding sports can be. I also know how frustrating it is when you're sidelined by an injury. So I've teamed up with the American Association of Orthodontists to ask young athletes to play it safe when playing sports. I spent years training to become a world-class athlete. I know what it takes to become an expert on the field. Orthodontists understand this too. They're experts in their field, helping kids and adults obtain healthy, beautiful smiles. They want to help athletes prevent injuries and stay in the game. It only takes a second to get hurt, and too many athletes are risking injury because they're not properly equipped during games and practices. Wear the right protective gear, like mouth guards, face masks, and helmets. Your first line of defense against preventable injuries. Play it safe, achieve your goals, and keep smiling. Visit braces.org.
Hi, this is Bill Hazen with great news. We're growing, and now it's easier than ever for you to keep up with Bill Hazen Productions and the popular radio programming we produce. First, there's our website, BillHazenProductions.com. If you miss a program or part of a program, just go to the site and listen. The current edition of all of our programs is right on the front page. Also, meet the special people who form our broadcast family and make our programs possible. Want to know about guests and topics we'll discuss on our shows? Then join our Twitter feed, @BillHazenPro, where you can be part of the conversation and share your thoughts on our programs. So we invite you to join us and enjoy America's most innovative sports broadcasts. You'll find them at our new web address, BillHazenProductions.com. Time to roll up the sleeves and go to work. We have another analysis session ahead of us, and John Jenkins joins us once again. We're going to talk about this last week's football games, and for that we turn to the High Plains drifter of college football who has drifted northward in the state of Texas, and he is now in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where SMU is making a lot of noise. Undefeated. Boy, I never even saw that, John, during the years when I was broadcasting them, and they were up rated as high as number number 5. Must be a lot of fun right now to keep an eye on the Mustangs.
Oh, my gosh. I tell you what, the Ponies are making some noise in Dallas. Hey, there's a lot of talk about them saying, hey, we're getting bored with this league. We need some Power 5 action. They're looking for Power 5 conference once again. You know, not since the days of Bobby Collins and Ron Meyer did they experience victories like this. And Sonny Dykes has got them on a roll, undefeated. Hey, they take on Temple this week. I say they go with another victory. They're going to notch their belt once again this week.
Well, maybe they can replace Georgia in the Southeastern Conference. Georgia had a real rough week, John.
Oh, did they? The most humbling profession in the world, this coaching football. Listen, Georgia, all through the preseason, all through the early part of the year, and even talk about, hey, there could be 3 out of the 4 playoff teams coming from the SEC, which I'd never believe. They knock each other off in the big neighborhood, don't they, Bill?
Yeah, really.
They knock, and I tell you, Georgia Bulldogs, boy, did they stumble, did they stump their toe against let's just call it an adequate South Carolina team playing 500 ball, but they beat the Georgia Bulldogs, and you got to give them credit for that. And now, hey, they are sick as they can be in Athens, Georgia. The only shot they've got is to run the table. And when I say that, I'm talking about win the rest of these SEC games and then be represented in the SEC East against the West and to win the SEC championship. That will put them back in the top 4, perhaps. Maybe not, because, hey, we've got a bunch of other undefeated teams that are playing great football.
Yeah, indeed. Well, you're only a few miles from the Cotton Bowl, and, of course, Oklahoma and Texas went after it. Oklahoma won. They have somewhat controlled the series. Texas has had some great wins in there as well. Anything that caught your eye in that game, John?
Oh, yeah, I tell you what, it was a good game. I watched it from top to bottom, and Texas is not there yet. We heard a lot of that noise before the season about, hey, Texas is back. They're back. They're back. They beat Georgia in the bowl game. Hey, they're back. No, they're not. They're not. I think Oklahoma, they had a good 2-touchdown lead most of the game. And fortunately for Texas, they kept that score close. They stayed close. They could not prevail. And, you know, as I mentioned about the top 4 now, there's conversation now, Bill. Before last week's games, there were 16 teams undefeated in America. So there was a lot of, hey, who's going to be left at the dance? You know what? The Texas Longhorns now have 2 losses, and they're a good team. They're a good team. But you know what? Those Longhorn fans and representatives and executives, not good is not good enough. Hey, bringing in Coach Herman there and his staff, they didn't come in there with that payroll to be a good football team. They want to be in the top 4. They're not going to be. They will not be once again this year. So that's the difference in today's football in contrast to years ago when, hey, we're going to a great bowl game at 9-3 or 8-4. None of that. Yeah. None of that is happening.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, I'm keeping an eye on Wisconsin. They had a little bump in the road, a little speed bump last year, but brother, did they do a number on Michigan State, and 38-0. John, this Wisconsin team looks awfully good.
Oh, don't they? Jonathan Taylor, if we want to talk about some mid-season Heisman candidates, you throw him in there along with a handful of quarterbacks that are playing well, that's your guy. He comes in there uninvited to the quarterback dance. He's the best-looking running back I've seen since Zeke Elliott came out of Ohio State, and rightfully so. Boy, he's got a good supporting cast with him.
Boy, you talk about teams that have come out of nowhere, and shame on both of us, John, for not mentioning this next school. Minnesota, undefeated, went...
the Golden Gophers.
Oh.
I tell you one thing, I feel bad. You know what? First time we've mentioned them.
Yes.
They're undefeated, 20th in the nation, probably not shown the respect that they need. They ought to be higher than that. They will win again this week. They play Rutgers. They will keep that win streak alive this week.
Boy, they really do. And let's remember that P.J. Fleck, John, has a little barbed wire in his background.
Hey, the tradition of Northern Illinois lives strong over there in Minnesota.
Boy, I'll see.
We're not just Flick, but our boy Jerry Cowan. Hey.
Yeah, it's been pretty impressive, that's for sure. A thought about LSU in Florida. LSU handled their assignment quite well, 42-28 over Florida.
Yeah, this one didn't surprise me. I watched that game, too, from top to bottom. And tell you what, Dan Mullen at Florida is doing a heck of a job. He went up against LSU with a backup quarterback, and the guy really played well. They had the lead at one time, late in the third quarter, 28-21. And Burrow, the quarterback from LSU, he would have no part of it. He was not going to just be denounced. Did he rile up and play? I think he completed 21 out of 24 passes in that game. And they ended up winning by 14 points. And they are setting the table for a big showdown against Alabama. But they've got some other SEC action that's going to be facing them before they get to that point, because as we know, that's how those upsets occur. Ask good old South Carolina and Georgia about that, right?
Oh, I'll say. Boy, are you right about that. Well, John, let's go ahead and hold it right here. Keep warm in the bullpen now, because we're going to call you in for the late innings here later in the show, and we'll go ahead and talk about some of the games coming up this week. So John Jenkins joining us from Dallas, and we will visit with him later in the program. Rex Lardner steps up to bat next on College Sports Weekly.
Okay, Jimmy, we just need to pick up some light bulbs.
Which ones are we supposed to buy, Grandpa?
Well, we can save money by using an energy-saving incandescent CFL or LED.
How about this bulb?
We need to replace a 60-watt bulb. That one is 800 lumens, so it should do the trick.
Lumens?
Lumens tell us how bright the light is. The more lumens, the brighter the bulb.
Grandpa, you're pretty bright yourself.
Lumens, the new way to shop for light. Learn more at energysavers.gov.
It is time to talk shop once again, and Rex Lardner steps to the fore. Longtime television sports executive at CBS, NBC, and at Turner. Also an associate commissioner at Conference USA. Rex now consults the broadcast industry, professional sports, and college sports entities, and he comes to us with his TV remote in hand from Tucson, Arizona. And Rex, it's good you have that remote ready, because if you happen to watch TV over the air, you might be looking at a scanning date this week, and most of our listeners are looking at that here in the United States. Now, that may not apply for our Canadian listeners, and we have quite a few. They may be looking at one also, but obviously it's different over in Europe and other areas of the world where people listen to this. But here in Chicago, where a number of TV stations are moving to clear out more space for cellular phone services, we have several stations that are moving. Nationally, about 1,000 TV stations are being repacked. The channel identification will still remain the same, Rex. I remember the first time we actually did this, and a lot of people were really confused and they needed help. Is it easier this time around?
I think it is, Bill, much easier. And I think it's easier because the technology is much better. It gets better and better, as we've discussed, every day. And I think it's going to be an easier situation. So much is going digital now in many ways, shape, and form, including, as you know, social media, that I really think the transition will be much better this year.
Rex, it's a good time to consider just how much of an audience we're looking at here. And currently, over-the-air viewers constitute about 18% of the Chicago market. Everybody else gets it through cable, satellite, or one of the new internet over-the-top services here. But more people are cutting the cord on cable, and they are getting an antenna to watch these stations directly, and, of course, at no cost, same as the guy in the Gulf of Mexico always points out whenever we see him out on his yacht. Is that 18% number likely to go up?
I think it is, Bill. I really do. I think, as we've discussed, cable television is becoming becoming so expensive, there's more and more cord cutting. And we've discussed at length, too, how it's hurt ESPN and continues to do so. And I think with the cost of cable going up, you'll see more and more cord cutting and more over-the-air TV and radio.
Yeah, I love that Gulf of Mexico guy. He's one of my. He's
something else, isn't he?
Yeah, that's the first guy I ever saw watching TV out there. But it's always good to know that he is around. You and I grew up with over-the-air TV and radio, and then came cable, and now internet video. A recent Pew survey is tracking viewership for all of this, and the results certainly surprised me. According to Pew, the audience for local television news, Rex, is changing. It's skewing older and toward less educated adults. Only 15% of viewers in the 18 to 29 age group actually watch local news. That goes up to 29% in the 30 to 49 bracket, 39% in the 50 and up. What does this mean for station owners?
Bill, I think it means the fact that you're going to see more and more advertisement related to senior citizens. In other words, my wife and I watch the nightly news every night, and Bill, every advertisement is related to health care for the elderly. And I think you'll see more and more of that, not just in nightly news, but also on the local news. It skews older, and I think the people, the millenniums and the 18 to 29-year-olds, have less patience for this kind of thing. When my sister Lonnie was an anchor, she used to say that the first 7 minutes were, hard news. If it bleeds, it leads.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You've heard that term. And then the next 7 minutes are related to local stories, flower shops and Boy Scouts and that kind of thing. Then you've got the weather report, and, of course, sports comes last. And I think people are just getting tired of this kind of thing, especially the young people, and it will continue to skew older.
Yeah. Speaking of sports coming last, Rex, if you are a local university and you're trying to build awareness for your sports teams, how do you do it if nobody is watching the local newscasts?
Bill, I think a couple of things. One is you've got to do other kinds of advertising. I really believe in billboard advertising to promote your product. Let's say it's Loyola Chicago basketball or whatever it is we've talked about before.
Yes.
And the other thing is also, to advertise on TV and radio, but in sports-related shows. In other words, during a Cub game or a White Sox game or a Bulls game for your college, if that's the situation. And I think a combination of those things will get the word out. But you're right, if people are not watching local news, it certainly hurts what you're trying to do.
A couple of months back, Rex, we learned that 8 Big 12 schools decided to sign aboard with ESPN Plus for their third-tier TV rights. In other words, they're putting them all on over-the-top delivery. In effect, Texas and Oklahoma are not included since they have separate third-tier deals. West Virginia Athletic Director Shane Lyons, who's been a previous guest on this program, he says it's a gamble for Big 12 schools. He describes it this way. Here's his quote. I think we're trying to make a short-term decision based on a long-term revenue impact. Very interesting. Our TV contracts expire in 24-25, so this gives a chance to see over the next few years how the digital platform actually works. We think the digital piece will experience growth, Lyons says. How much of a gamble is this, Rex?
Bill, I don't think it's really much of a gamble. I really think with the technology, as we've talked about, how it's grown and increased and so forth, third-tier TV rights will continue to grow. I think ESPN needs more viewers and so forth and so on. But I really think it's a pretty good gamble. It's related to, what we've seen, and it's the improved technology. We'll see more and more of this kind of thing happening.
Down to the nuts and bolts of it, ESPN Plus is distributed strictly through the internet, Rex, and it has a little over 1 million subscribers currently and moving upward, but not at a very rapid rate. What kind of audience will ESPN Plus need to have in order to make money?
Well, certainly more than 1 million viewers. But I think, Bill, like we talked before, I think another thing that would really help ESPN and all of their different networks is a partner. We've talked about that, the idea of maybe it's Amazon, maybe it's Yahoo, maybe another partner. But I think getting a partner would help them in so many different areas with ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, and ESPN Plus, and I think it would help them. They need more revenue and a stronger force to make all these profitable.
Here's an interesting item, Rex. Very few college athletes make it into the professional ranks. Most of them make the transition into the professional world, and they begin a career there. 3 universities have been studying this transition, Rex. These universities are Arkansas, Coastal Carolina, and Bowling Green. Their study reports that 57% of college athletes are finding the transition to professional life to be unpleasant. And the first thing they are citing is a profound sense of loss. That's combined with several other factors. This survey begs the question of whether student athletes are being prepared for life after sports. What do you think?
You know, Bill, I'm surprised that the figure is as low as it is. I mean, I think it should be higher. The two things I think that athletes lose when they graduate or leave their eligibility are they're always in the limelight and so forth, and now that's taken away. And the camaraderie, Bill, of playing with your teammates is such an important factor, and all of a sudden they've lost that too. I mean, obviously there are reunions and get-togethers. It's almost like being cut from a professional sports team, that all of a sudden your life is not over, but you've had to reposition it to go into the professional world.
Yeah, you're washed up at age 21. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm really stuck by the phrase, Rex, and it really stuck out to me, a profound sense of loss. And think about it, many of these athletes have had the spotlight firmly on them. They've been told just how great they are by the recruiters who want them to play at their school. They've had it pretty much their own way for a long time. Who wouldn't feel a profound sense of loss if all of that went away?
Oh, I agree, Bill. I got to be good friends with Tom Flynn. He was an All-America defensive back at Notre Dame in the late 70s and was an undrafted free agent. And he was cut by the Cowboys that particular year, and he just didn't know what to do with his life. I mean, it was one of those things where football was his life for 21 years, and all of a sudden it's gone. The camaraderie is gone, the notoriety, all of that kind of thing. What does he do? And I think a lot of athletes, Bill, goes through the same kind of thing. And it's not just football and basketball and baseball players. I think it could be volleyball players. It could be cross-country athletes, even skiers. I think, once you lose the limelight of your school and the camaraderie with your teammates, you really do have a profound sense of loss.
I see a lot of that in the G League, Rex. And the interest,
I bet you do, yeah.
Yes, very definitely. And the G League is kind of a buffer that sits between the NBA and the colleges. At least that's the way it has functioned largely to date. And it always is worth remembering that it's good to have a plan B in life, because there's nothing guaranteed. When you've watched the G League for a while, there are an awful lot of good players, really good players, that don't make it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point, Bill. The same thing is true, obviously, with the other professional sports. And I think if you have that profound sense of loss, I think that's a good way to say it.
It's kind of like ratings on TV, Rex, and certainly you know all about that.
Absolutely, Bill. You're right. And sometimes you can really misunderstand what ratings are. I mean, not only ratings, but the demographics related to it. A program may skew older, and you may think it might be younger, or the reverse is true. That's what we're saying about the nightly news. Every commercial is related to a health product for the elderly senior citizens.
Yeah. The nightly news is anchored by Lester Holt, and there's something to be said about this also. Lester was a Chicago news anchor for a while. He worked at Channel 2 here, and Channel 2 has been on the floor of this market for a long time, and he could not turn it around. And what do you know, a few years later, and I keep hearing the phrase associated with him that he is America's most trusted news anchor today.
Wow.
So you never know.
You never know.
In the words of Maurice Lucas, you never know. And with that, we'll close the door on this one, and we'll see you next week, Rex.
Sounds great, Bill. Good being with you as always.
All right, good being with you too. Rex Lardner, We Talk Shop. And we will be back with more of College Sports Weekly.
Founded in 1962, the National Collegiate Baseball Writers Association is dedicated to the advancement of college baseball. Membership includes writers, broadcasters, and publicists of the sport. NCBWA members serve as the voting body for the Dick Howser Trophy National Player of the Year. The organization has a website at ncbwa.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at ncbwa.
On College Sports Weekly, we like to take a look at athletics from many different angles. And certainly high school is a major factor in this. It is interlinked in terms of recruiting and various aspects. And of course, some wonderful experiences come about from those who compete at the high school level. We're going to visit with a gentleman who's been involved with it for several years now as the commissioner of the Indiana High School Athletic Association, also known as the IHSAA. He is Commissioner Bobby Cox, and we have him on the line with us. He's a former Butler Bulldog, so you know I'm fine with that. There's no problems there. Commissioner, it's great to visit, and thank you so very much. Why don't we start with a little bit of a state-of-the-state overview for the IHSAA and where it sits.
Well, Bill, I think the IHSA is in a good place right now. 412 member schools, strong at this point. We are in the midst of our fall season. We've just completed our fall area principal meeting tour where we roll out programming that we're implementing this year, enhancements to our members' website, a variety of other programs, including sportsmanship and citizenship, that we're making an intentional focus on adult behaviors. And again, another concerted effort in recruitment of officials. So those programs are out there and being executed by our staff. I feel like we've had a very good fall. We are in the midst of our championship series now. We will have our state championship unified flag football game, which is our co-ed program with unified sports with Special Olympics Indiana, students with and without intellectual disabilities competing together, representing their school for the opportunity to play for a state championship in this sport, unified flag football. So we're very excited about that coming up this Saturday. And then we've already contested girls golf, and we're ramping up for boys and girls soccer, boys and girls cross country, boys tennis, and volleyball, and then ultimately our football championships. So we'll conclude on Thanksgiving weekend at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis.
One of the untold stories about the state has been the tremendous growth of this state. It has right around 6.5 million people. It's a big state, and it is heavily recruited in many sports. The colleges are in there. I know you keep a very close eye on this, particularly in light of some of the recently publicized recruiting scandals. How do you go about monitoring the recruiting process so that it remains on the up and up, which I know is where you want it to be?
Well, we have to rely on our member schools, Bill. And the one thing that I think is really important is the articulation between the association office and our member school coaches. We have great communication with all of our coach associations. And when these types of challenges arise, then we come together to talk about what kinds of things can we do to ensure that we are protecting the student athlete in all cases. We want to make sure student athletes are not exploited. We want to make sure that education is first. That's within our mission statement, that athletics remain subservient to the academic missions of our schools. College recruiting, procurement of students to be athletes across all divisions of college sport is something that we take a big interest in to make sure that our young people are being handled in the right manner, and whatever we can do to assist that, to help our member schools and to help the student athlete, we're prepared to reach out and do those types of things.
You know, with the growth of the state of Indiana, some of the high schools within the state have grown enormously. Also, Carmel, which is the largest high school in the state, I believe it still is, and you're an alma mater there, it's almost at 5,000 students. That's a big school. Schools like Warren Central, Ben Davis, Mishawaka Penn, there are a bunch of them that are very, very large schools. And I suppose with this size, that assuring the competitive balance that you would like is something that you have to keep an eye on. What does the IHSAA do to make sure that that competitive balance is where you want it to be?
Well, there's several things that we do. You're right. The large schools such as Carmel, Warren Central, Ben Davis, Penn, those schools, Lake Central, those schools continue to grow. Carmel's over 5,400 now. When I was the athletic director there in the late 1990s, it was 3,300. And we've only increased football by one class in those days. So you see how that competitive balance question becomes a little more challenging as these schools continue to grow. And let's just take the bottom of 4A in our basketball divisions. You've got the largest school with 5,400, and you've got the bottom school at about 1,700. Well, those aren't even the same schools. Those aren't even close to the same schools, but they're in the same tournament. So that creates some conversation about what do we do next. And there have been some conversations around our state about creating a fifth class in the four-class sports, which would include both basketballs, volleyball, baseball, and softball. Softball's probably not ready to get there yet because we don't have a full complement of our member schools playing softball like we do basketball. It's an ongoing conversation. And then the other thing that we've done in the smaller classifications is we have applied what is known as the success factor. It's Rule 2.5 in our bylaws. It's based upon your success in tournament series events across a 2-year reclassification period. And if your school resides in a enrollment classification below the largest enrollment classification, and you achieve a high level of success over a 2-year period under a chart that we've established, then that school in that sport only moves up a classification until they get to the largest classification if they continue to experience that success. So we've worked on some ways to try to balance that playing field, if you will. It's not an exact science, and as long as you have schools that have 5,400 kids and schools that have 100 kids, you're always going to have that challenge, and you can break them up into classifications and apply success factors. But at the end of the day, there are going to be some winners and there are going to be some losers. And what we like to tell our members is winning is not final and losing is not fatal. And you learn a lot of lessons from losing as well as winning. And we need to just make sure that this experience is an educational one for the student athletes that we serve.
And that sounds to me like the exact balance that high school athletics should have, a very worthy goal. Commissioner Bobby Cox, I'd like to invite you back next week so we can continue. We have a number of things to discuss, and I'd like to invite you back to be with us next week. Bobby Cox is the commissioner of the Indiana High School Athletic Association. Gene DeLisio covers the small college beat next on College Sports Weekly. Time now for the small college beat, where Gene DeLisio reports a major disappointment for a Division III football power. Gene?
Bill, the NCAA is stripping Mary Hardin-Baylor of its 2016 Division III football championship and all wins earned in the 2016 and 2017 seasons. The action was taken because Mary Hardin-Baylor coach Pete Fredenberg loaned his 2006 Subaru to two student athletes, one for a period of 18 months, the other for less than 1 hour. The loan of that vehicle violates NCAA rules on impermissible benefits. The school imposed several penalties on itself upon learning of those violations, and Fredenberg was suspended for 3 months and served a 3-game suspension at the start of the 2018 season. But the NCAA felt it had to impose additional sanctions. Coach Fredenberg accepts responsibility for those violations.
I've been an NCAA head coach for 22 years. I'm well trained in the NCAA rules, and we have an excellent compliance program. The rules regarding impermissible benefits have some complexities, especially if the same benefits may be available to others outside of athletics. In this case, I misinterpreted the rule and misapplied it in this situation. I didn't ask anyone else. Even after I was questioned by a staff member, I made a serious mistake. I feel terrible about it. I've learned from it. I want to move forward.
Mary Hardin-Baylor football coach Pete Fredenberg. Mary Hardin-Baylor is ranked number 1 this week in the NCAA Division III football rankings. Mount Union of Ohio is 2nd, Wisconsin-Whitewater 3rd, and St. John's of Minnesota ranked number 4. St. John's coming off a big win last week as the Johnnies and coach Gary Fashing shut out Bethel 19-0.
If you would have told me that we would have shut them out, I would have said that you're crazy. In the tapes that we saw, they moved the football on everybody and had some big plays. And I can't say enough about Jerry Hogan and Brandon Novak, Damien Dumonceau, Matt Darling, Andy Oje. Those guys put together a great game plan, and we talked all week about it's tough with them because they have a quarterback who can run. And I thought we bottled him up.
St. John's of Minnesota football coach Gary Fashing speaking with the Johnny Sports Network. Bethel, by the way, is ranked 10th in the NCAA Division III football poll this week, and St. Thomas is ranked number 11. St. John's and St. Thomas face each other in St. Paul on Saturday. St. Thomas also trying to do something that's never been done in the NCAA, and that is move directly from Division III to Division I athletics. St. Thomas was removed from the Minnesota Intercollegiate Athletic Association earlier this year because the Tommy sports programs were too dominant in that league. Rather than join another Division III conference or move up to the Division II Northern Sun Conference, St. Thomas is applying for membership in the Division I Summit League. And Summit League Commissioner Tom Dupo feels St. Thomas is a good fit for his conference.
There's a culture of success there. That's important for us. And they're located in an area where, you have so many high schools to recruit from.
Summit League Commissioner Tom Dupo speaking with KSTP-TV. The Summit League does not offer football, and so St. Thomas would have to join another league as an affiliate member for football, probably the Pioneer League or the Missouri Valley Conference. The NCAA has to approve the move by St. Thomas, and if okayed, the Tommies could begin play in the Summit League in the fall of 2021. Illinois Springfield's new men's basketball coach is Matt Brock, who served as head coach at NAIA Missouri Baptist the last 4 seasons. Brock was 87-40 in 4 years at Missouri Baptist, including a school record 28-5 last season. Brock is already hitting the local recruiting trail pretty hard.
We've been to some places that we've been more familiar with. We've been in St. Louis. We've been in some other areas, central Illinois. We've been trying to touch base with several coaches here in the city and in the area. I think everybody is pretty welcoming. I think they're excited that we want to recruit locally, and rate regionally and work out from there. But we've been up to Chicago. I was joking around with somebody earlier today that there's some pretty good players in Chicago that we're recruiting that I might have to switch my allegiances from the red to the blue, but I don't know they'll have to do that. But I think it's just like any new program. Everybody kind of wants to see what you're going to do.
Illinois Springfield men's basketball coach Matt Brock. Fayetteville State is naming Luke DeLisio as men's basketball coach. DeLisio is a former head coach at CIAA rival Bowie State, and he assisted at North Carolina Central for the last 3 years. DeLisio has 339 wins in his college coaching career. And Bill, that's our small college sports update for this week. I'm Gene DeLisio for College Sports Weekly.
All right, Gene, thank you. We'll check in with you once again next week. And when we return, we'll chase down the High Plains drifter of college football, John Jenkins, next on College Sports Weekly.
You don't usually get a stock tip from a 16-year-old, but I'm here to tell you about a different kind of stock. It's called Better Futures, a stock for social change that's not about making money. Instead, you invest to help students like me go to college, which ends up making the future better for all of us. My name is Alicia, and I'm your dividend.
Invest in better futures with UNCF. Visit uncf.org/invest. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. Brought to you by UNCF and the Ad Council.
Well, it is time to put on your prognostication hat. We're going to bring in John Jenkins, the High Plains drifter, and he's been drifting around finding out what's really going on in college football. The coach is back with us, and now, John, we're going to dig into some of the big games this weekend, and certainly for folks who happen to be in the mountains of Pennsylvania, it's going to be Penn State hosting Michigan at Happy Valley. Wouldn't it be fair to say for Michigan that's an absolute must-win?
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be the big game of the week all around the country as far as matchups here. I say that being respectful to Michigan. It may not turn out that way. I think Penn State, they are strong, and they keep getting stronger week in and week out. They're ranked number 7th in the country, rightfully so. Michigan, on the other hand, boy, do they have murderers row looking them square in the eyes this week, next week, and right down on to till season's end. Jim Harbaugh, he better notch his belt real tight, because they've got Penn State, as mentioned, coming in there. Next week is Notre Dame. And then we know about Ohio State to end the season. But taking first things first, boy, they're going to have a full day's work against Penn State.
Well, John, my spotlight is going to be tuned between the hedges once again here to see if Georgia stubs their toe back-to-back. Kentucky's coming in there, and you may look at that and say, well, so what? But you know something? Kentucky is certainly gone a long way, and Georgia is feeling something they haven't felt all year.
Oh, that's right. Highly touted offseason. Thrust into the top 4 to start the season, played well, and then run into that buzzsaw with South Carolina that just hurt their feelings. Bill, crazy thing about this sport, maybe they were reading their press clippings too much, because they were something like a 22-point favorite against South Carolina and lost that game. Once again, they face a Kentucky team. They're favored by about 25 over them. But we'll see if they've grown up any and matured any from that loss. See if they've learned anything, right?
Yeah, well, and John, you've been there with this. You get off to a bad start in a game like this, and you start looking over your shoulder. Hey, is this going to happen again? Are we going to have this 2 weeks straight? That can get in the players' heads.
Oh, absolutely. You bet it can. And I tell you what, it's, as you mentioned, it's early in the game will be the tale of the moment of truth. If Kentucky can jump out there and grind that football and run the football. They had over 300 yards rushing against Arkansas, and they've shown some flashes now. They've shown some flashes, certainly last 2 years, just total being real respectful. So this could be a ball game. We'll see. That's why they're going to line up and play it, right?
Well, that's exactly why. We head out west, John, for our next one, and this is kind of interesting. Earlier in the year, you would not have circled this game, but the Pac-12 is totally topsy-turvy. It is all over the place. Where's Washington? Where's Oregon? Where is USC? And they're all middle of the pack
nobody.
Here. And now you're looking at Arizona State at Utah, and suddenly that's a pretty big ball game.
Yeah, you know what? Surprisingly, Herman Edwards, there was a lot of doubt. They said, this guy's been removed from college football. He has no clue. Hadn't even been around pro football in years, and yet he and his staff's done a really good job, just losing one ball game, and so they're feeling good about themselves, and this is going to be a good one. That's the only game of interest out there. As mentioned, you've heard me say all year long, there's absolutely no defense being played out there, and your traditional teams from years ago, Southern Cal, UCLA, none of that is showing up this year at all. Nothing.
Well, Ole Miss and Mississippi State both had rough weeks this last week, man.
Yeah, they did.
And it's not going to get any easier. Ole Miss now has Texas A&M, and that could be a tough day at the office.
On the other hand, Ole Miss has done well against the Aggies in recent years. A&M is they're starting to show that they're pretty average this season, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe they're a better football team than Mississippi. But Ole Miss has jumped up. They've declared themselves a couple of times, and they could do it in this game. So this is one of those that could surprise us.
How about Nikita?
Tennessee Vols, boy, they had a big win. They upset a rebuilding Mississippi State team
They sure did.
a week ago. But they're going to be brought back to earth, and they're going to really pay for it playing Alabama this week. If they fly into Tuscaloosa, if they fly in there on a 747, whatever's left of them may come back on a Cessna.
I'll tell you this, Nikita will have both shoes off in this game, I can guarantee you. He'll be pounding the table with both of them.
He'll be pounding the table with both shoes, you say,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can guarantee you that.
I'll tell you one thing. I'm here, like I said, I've come out of the big neighborhood of the SEC into Big 12 country over here in Dallas. Bill, I tell you what, you used to roam the streets over here. I've been defending you all week long.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah. Hey, Sonny Dykes, it's Bill Hazen and the SMU Ponies. That's the talk over here in Dallas, Texas.
And as it should be, John. Certainly I've had a lot to do with turning SMU around. But I'll tell you, when I was broadcasting there, they were awfully good. Not in basketball so much, but football, they were really good. It was a lot of fun. How about those barbed wire boys now? Northern Illinois is back on the road again. They've only had one home game all year. They came back and won it. And now they are on the road again, and they're going to be at Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, poor guys. Like I jokingly said a couple weeks ago, I said, gosh, I'm looking at their schedule. Do they even have a home game until 2024?
Yeah, that's about right, too. Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh. The victories will prevail at Minnesota from the Northern Illinois representatives.
There you go.
We can always say that whether it's Jerry Cowan or Fleck, we're going to keep the barbed wire tradition alive, even if it's at Minnesota, right?
Well, that's right, and I've got to believe that P.J. Fleck mentioned something. Northern Illinois played at Nebraska and lost a little earlier, and I'm sure old P.J. probably told the Nebraska folks, "Hey, this one's for Northern Illinois. We wanted to get one for them." Oh man,
that's it.
Well, that's crazy, John. Let's have a lot of fun. Let's enjoy some of these games, and we'll be back to talk about them next week.
You bet. I tell you what, I'll be down in my good old stomping grounds of Houston next week. Got a big celebration. I'll be coming to you live on Thursday night. From that one, we'll be doing that live Thursday night and have my beloved Houston Cougars celebration of our great 1989 team with my Heisman-winning Andre Ware and the great David Klingler backing him up that season.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be a lot of fun to see all those guys and have fun again.
Well, John, it'll be great to talk about it, too, and for you to share the experience. They are honoring your great team, and certainly we'll talk about that next week. It'll be a lot of fun. John Jenkins, the High Plains Drifter. Go get him, John.
All right, man. Have a good one.
All right, you too. The High Plains Drifter is drifting, and we will be back with more of College Sports Weekly.
I love being a part of Action Team.
For more than a decade, Major League Baseball players and action teams of high school students have been working together to train and inspire the next generation of volunteers.
It's one of the best feelings in the world.
Just that simple act is transforming someone else's life.
All-star Giancarlo Stanton and Chris Capuano join Action Team captains to make a difference in their communities.
It'll just make you feel so good about yourself.
I'd do anything to convince you just to be a part of this.
For more information, go to actionteam.org.
Time to head for home. There are 9 college football programs that play to absolute 100% capacity. You'll be surprised by who isn't on that list. The story next week. And now let's introduce our team. The executive producer is Keith Haney. Coordinating producer Bo Carter. Small college editor Gene DeLisio. And a special thanks to sports information officers throughout the country for their contributions to this program. Now, this is Bill Hazen saying thanks for being with us. Be sure to tell your friends about us. And we'll see you next week on College Sports Weekly.